It's been a little while since I did a long form video. Today we are going to talk about how hurting people hurt others. Hurt people hurt others. So stay around. All separations and all arguments in families are caused from hurt feelings. So families, unless there's something terribly, terribly wrong, you may have some narcissist or something like that in the family, which would make this kind of different. But in most families, there is a general sense of love. Children grow up to love their parents. Parents naturally love their children. So as I go into this, I want you to realize that this whole video is about families that have that love connection. I am not talking about families where you're having extreme abuse, narcissistic, sociopath, or psychopathic entities coming in the mix. This video is specifically for families that have a bond, they have love, and most every family does. There may be separations, there may be problems, there may be arguments, but that does not mean that they don't love each other. So just going forth, I want to make this disclosure that that's what this video is about. Arguments, separations, estrangements, all of these things happen in a family because of hurt feelings. There may be two brothers that come to blows. There may be two brothers that, never speak again. It could be over differences in the way they were treated or perceived situations that there doesn't seem to be fairness with the parents. It could be caused from anything. But if let go on, you may have two brothers or brother or sister or an entire family unit that just kind of blows apart and never speaks again. Now, I know this from experience, and I'm not going to go into my family traumas, but there is a lot of that in my family unit. And it was all caused by hurt feelings, misconceptions, misunderstandings. But if let go on very long, hardness of heart will often set in. And sometimes there's hardness from the heart from the very beginning. But we're going to do our best in this video to break down what happens that causes rifts and separations and estrangements and cause siblings that actually love each other to never speak again. Now, these arguments or separations or estrangements or whatever you want to call them, they've been happening since the beginning of time with Cain and Abel. This is nothing new. Even back then, it was caused from hurt feelings. It is not because they don't love each other. They may feel like they hate each other, but most of the time, sometimes, it's because they actually do love each other that there's a problem. So if one family member feels that they're being treated harshly or not being treated fairly, or that if another family member isn't loyal or isn't being kind or isn't supporting them or something, very often they'll get their feelings hurt. It's not because they don't love the other person. It's because they do love the other person, and they feel like that love is being betrayed, and that love is the most sacred thing that can be. But say, for instance, one sibling lies on the other or frames them, something happened and they blamed them. They did it not because they didn't love that sibling. They did it because they were trying to get their own butt out of the knot. And a lot of these things are the spur of the moment, you do it without thinking, you do it in a fit of anger, or a fit of pettishness, or a fit of feeling hurt, and then later you're sorry. And if both can be sorry and come again together, then that's great. And this is why the Bible teaches not to let the sun go down on your wrath, because if you hold these things in too long, they can become furniture in your soul, permanent fixtures in your soul. Oftentimes these situations happen because you do love the other person, and you feel like that love is being dishonored, and so you can get your feelings really, really hurt. A lot of times situations happen between siblings because there's some sort of sibling rivalry. A lot of things can happen. A mother can favor one child, the dad favors another, or we're all human, we're all messes. We walk around in a mess all the time, and a lot of this is caused by misunderstandings and failure to understand what is actually happening. This is why I'm sorry's are important. This is why accepting apologies is important. And this is why forgiveness is important. Let not the sun go down on your wrath. This is why the old biblical teachings of honor your mother and father, and husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church, and also, parents, fathers, and that would go for fathers and mothers, provoke not your children to wrath. I mean, you could have a dozen videos just on all of that thing. But the reason that these precepts were set there is, to help us untangle this weave of family. The Bible also teaches that in the end times, your foes will be they of your own household. And that is because oftentimes we lose natural affection. Mothers lose the natural affection of a mother toward a child, or a child loses that natural affection. There's a lot of alienation that goes along with this. You have fathers that alienate their children against their mother, or their mother alienates against the father, or the grandparents alienate against the parents. We have to realize that these things will happen, and they do happen, and they've always happened. But what really, really counts is the fact that love, familial love, is the glue that holds it all together. And you have to realize and remember this. Your family, your sibling, your mother, your father, whoever, they may not be perfect. They may have a lot of faults, but they still belong to you. And your family is the most important thing that you will ever have in your life. I'm going to touch on something that I have talked about before. So I've got a whole video on understanding highly sensitive people, or a highly sensitive person. And a lot of this is generational, but I've also got a video, actually 2 videos, I split it in half, on the crusty old soldiers. So this is all generational. For the last 200 years, we have been going through generation after generation after generation, and each one had its own particular challenges. There was the Depression, there was the different wars, there were the pioneers that struggled to survive. Then we went through the industrial age, and then we went through the electronic age, and now we're going through the age where AI and high technology is coming along. So through the millennials, and then on through Gen Z and the alpha, whatever, they're just incredibly high tech. I am a firm believer that through the generations we are actually improving as humanity. Most people will not agree with me. They'll say that this is the worst generation that's ever lived, and it is not true. And the reason that I know this is because I am a genealogist, I am a historian, and I know what the history is. And if you think this is the worst age that has ever lived, you do not know history, and you are not a student of history. So you need to check that out, because we are getting better as we go. But through every generation we have these humps. We have these humps and these bumps and things that we have to figure out. And right now the family is under attack, and it's been going on for several decades, because I could tell you, if I was willing to share and expose people, which I'm not, but I could tell you over the last 40 years at least of 4 or 5 different situations where there has been estrangements in families, there has been barricades put up that have separated grandparents from grandchildren, children from parents, great-grandchildren, and it just goes on and on, this divisiveness. Now, regardless of what some people think, I am an advocate for the family. I am an advocate for marriages, especially marriages where you share children. But even if you don't, if you are bonded together, you may have problems, but you need to overcome them. But it takes 2. You've heard that saying, and it is very true. It takes 2. Generally, you have a variance between the crusty old soldier, that's my word for it, and the highly sensitive person. And this comes into play with Gen X and Gen Z a lot. Gen X are tough, ruddy, they're just survivors. If you threw them out of a wagon and all they could hold on to was a chain in their teeth, they probably would hold on. Can't slap them around enough to get them to call uncle. They're just tough. And I'm technically a boomer, but I was raised more or less like Gen X. And so, that's the way I've been. This is why my channel was originally called Phoenix, because you can burn me to the ground and ultimately I'm going to come back out, at least until my last breath. That you can pin all kinds of feathers in your hat if you want to. If you're a Gen X and you are tough as nails, let's just slow down just a little bit on all of that bravado that you have, this grand egocentric idea that you are almost a superior generation because you handled it. Oh my goodness, you drank out of a water hose. If I hear that one more time, I'm going to scream. I drank out of a corrupted system and threw my guts up every 3 months. That does not make me a superior person. It makes me neglected and abused, and I've got some pains from it, but it doesn't make me a superior person because I'm tough. No, and tough people are usually hurt people, and as I titled this video, hurt people hurt other people, and they keep this bag of garbage that I've talked, they just keep passing it down. And trust me, I have hurt a lot of people because I was hurt. But now that I'm old enough to actually weigh these things out and repent over my attitude and repent over my, self-preservation, I'm starting to see these things. The highly sensitive person, I've got a theory. This is mostly Gen Z. It's kind of started in the millennials. There are a few of the younger millennials that are highly sensitive people. I have great respect for highly sensitive people. I am in certain ways highly sensitive. Some people would just call my highly sensitive pettish. I have high respect and I have high hopes in highly sensitive people, because listen, folks, as humanity, we've got to lay down the sword eventually, or it's just going to continue on until we destroy each other. And it's almost like each generation tries to play whack-a-mole on their children and their grandchildren, knocking them down the road. Why do you want to do that? If you have children that are highly sensitive, don't find fault with them. Don't pick on them. Don't be berating them all the time because they don't have some of the skills you have. They're not supposed to have the skills you had. They don't need to know how to fix wagon wheels. I'm sorry. They don't need necessarily to know how to drive a standard. They may not even need to know how to write cursive. But are they going to be up to the task to handle the high technology that's coming along? Yes, they will. They'll be able to handle that. And will they be more empathic, more caring, more sensitive? Yes, they will. Unless you've browbeat them and to the point that they don't trust anybody. They're like a scared rabbit that's been chased by the fox. They're going to be afraid of everything. And that's our fault. That's the older generation's fault. I know I'm referring to the Bible a whole lot. This is not exact quotes, but the Bible says offenses are going to come. And in every family, you are going to have those that are hurt. You are going to have those that are hurting others. You are going to have offenses. You are going to have arguments, and you're going to have things happen that make everybody want to fly apart. Now, when these things happen, I'm going to tell you, humans don't think like they should because they don't understand like they should. But the cure to this is, rather than fly apart, rather than argue and hurt the other, and then the other one hurts that one, and then back and forth, or just avoiding the whole situation, the real cure to this is talking it out. If everybody could be of one mind to settle the problem and come together, talking is the best healer. Talking it out is the best cure. But to do that, everybody has to be open, everybody has to be upfront, and there has to be one goal, and that goal is to preserve the family. Not to preserve yourself, not to protect yourself, not to make a point. The whole thing has to be around preserving the family unit. That is a hard state to get in. It's a hard place to be in, to try to get everybody to come together like that. While crusty old soldiers are stuck in their ways, and they generally have a perception that is guided, or maybe I should say misguided, by their last generation, their parents' teachings, how they were raised, they tend to be really unmovable and hard-headed. It's really hard to get through to them that they are wrong, that they are at fault. So if you're a Gen Z or a boomer and you get what I'm saying and you're a crusty old soldier, the first thing that you need to do is to realize that your children are superior to you in a lot of ways. They could be smarter, they're quicker, they're more attuned to technology and things that are going on in this day. The kids and the young people in this day and hour can multitask and think about more than one thing. They're really quick to pick up on false attitudes, prehistoric anger. They are triggered by things that are just wrong. And you have to realize, hey, you may be grandma, you may be grandpa, you may be parents. You need to be able to admit when you're wrong. I'm going to speak to the highly sensitive younger generations, because your first reaction is to run and hide. Your first reaction is fight or flight, because you simply don't want to do this. And you've tried it enough with your older siblings or your old parents or your old grandparents to know that it's very, very difficult to make a point, because they kind of just look down on you or whatever. I don't think they mean it that way, but they just have this superiority complex. And after a while, you just want to give up. Well, I would say, rather than run away from confrontation, rather than run away from the situation, if your crusty old soldier or your mom or your dad or your grandpa or your grandma are just incredibly harsh, the best thing to do is just fly under the radar. Don't necessarily try to make a point. If you feel like that you have to, that's great. Most relationships are not perfect anyway, and some truths are just better left unsaid. To keep the peace. Again, the Bible said, blessed is the peacemaker. Blessed is the person that just holds their tongue. But again, we need to realize that the most important thing is preserving the family unit. Not to the destruction of your own soul, not to the point where you're going to accept, horrible abuse. No, there's just no sense trying to teach Grandpa that the modern way you live is the best, because he may still be of a mind that nobody goes dookie in their house. If you go dookie in your house, you're nasty. You need to go to the outhouse. That was one of the things that my grandfather had it took years for his kids to convince him to put a bathroom in the house, because he could not comprehend that a person would do that in their own home. So the outhouse was much more sanitary and much more appropriate. Oh, so I don't know why I went there, but do realize that talking things through with level heads and an idea to preserve the family, maybe kicking conversations down the road till everybody can heal a little bit. I get that. If everybody on this playing board is trying to heal and they're trying to grow and improve their character, there's no reason why that this healing can't be done in a way where everybody stays at peace. Maybe just avoid some conversations or whatever, but then again, everybody has to be of the mind to do this. Sometimes the best way of healing is pulling the wood from the fire. If you keep stoking the fire, it's going to get worse. So sometimes pulling the wood away from the fire, letting the fire die down, and everybody just kind of going quiet for a little while. And, after a while, that anger will be replaced by longing. You start missing your loved ones. The anger is no longer there, but there might be other things that are keeping you from, reattaching to your loved ones. You may be fearful. You may dread it. There may be times that you have shame. There may be times that you're embarrassed that you said things wrong. Listen, I have been through all of these situations. And honestly, I am a crusty old soldier. And I get my feelings hurt. If I sense disloyalty or sense that someone doesn't love me like they should, and usually that's false, but if I don't catch myself, I can come back and say really, really hurtful things. And so this is my bad. And, I've also learned that you have to forgive yourself, but sometimes, no matter how much you grovel, if the other person is incredibly, incredibly hurt, it may take a very long time. But A time of silence, a time of letting the fire die down, a time of walking away sometimes is in order. If the time goes on too long, these barriers may become insurmountable. There are people in my life that I have grieved and grieved years ago because they cut ties with me. And over time, after grieving and missing them and being sorrowful and everything, and begging for forgiveness, begging, groveling with my I'm sorries, after a while, it kind of fades. You realize that while you were young, you thought they were so important in your life, and now, you're on top of things pretty much, and you don't really feel the need to be with them. Another thing that can happen is if you see that your relationship with them was a lot of manipulation, or they weren't being totally truthful or honest with you, and there's a lot of things that can happen, and you're like, do I really want that again? If they weren't true to me then, how will they be true to me now? And these things happened to me when I was incredibly young, but I'm just saying that if situations go like this too long, it's harder and harder and harder to pull it together, because your heart hardens. The human heart can only stand so much pain, and then eventually it just hardens over. So it's best to keep these separations short-lived. And even now, I realize that those people in my family that are separated from me, that I've grieved over for years, just because I'm not anxious to jump back in a relationship with them because I think it'd be more of the same, or I'm nervous about it because they're always their expectations are just, I feel like, are more than I can endure. And this can be with siblings, this can be with parents. I also realize the validity and the importance of family and how that it should be preserved. But unfortunately, hardness of heart often takes over, and then everybody just suffers forever, because just because you're not feeling the pain, that doesn't mean it's not there, and that doesn't mean that you don't have a deep embedded scar. So it's always better to make amends if you can. Crusty old soldiers hurt just as much as everybody else. They may not look like they hurt, but they do hurt. They hurt because they feel a sting from a lack of loyalty, a lack of love, and they don't understand that a lot of times they've pushed their family, their children away. All they see is that their family no longer, want them around. They no longer show attachment or love or caring. And, if they've worked and labored and toiled their entire life for their children, and then their children just cut off ties because they're rough and they talk rough and they seem rather harsh, they still hurt. And then they can say things they shouldn't say. Oh my gosh, I have seen this so much in fathers. They just somehow or other couldn't respect their children. Every parent needs to start out respecting their children, accepting their individuality, their talents. Then on the other hand, the children, they hurt because they want validation. They want to know that this parent that's like the crusty old soldier actually values them, that actually accepts them as who they are. You may be a farmer and your son wants to be an artist or a concert pianist, that kind of situation. That child needs to know that you're going to support them no matter what. But what happens is one gets hurt and says something harsh to the other one, and then harsh words start being exchanged. And it doesn't matter how sorry you are, the damage is done, and sometimes it takes years and sometimes it never heals. We need to stop hurting each other. It's very important that we stop hurting each other. So I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick, but I'm going to say again, hurting people hurt other people, but every person is different. This can have, how you deal with your hurt and your pain is different. There are children that are treated really badly as a child that grow into heartless, narcissist, sociopath, psychopaths. But you can take that hurt and take it the other direction and become, incredibly needy, incredibly empathic, grovel your way around other people because you feel like that you are horrible. So people, because of their differences in personality, attachment styles, all different things, will take pain and do something different with it. It's our responsibility after we become adults to try to choose that path that is upright. Now, I suffer from a lot of internal pain. I have had a lot of punishment in my life. And one of the things, and this is kind of like the seed that started this video, one of the things that came to my mind over the past 24 hours is I can be incredibly depressed, and sometimes I've never been suicidal. That's not something I deal with, but I do deal with chronic depression, chronic loneliness, a chronic sense of abandonment. And sometimes I do really, really well and I'm on top of things. And at other times it hits me like a rock and I can just simply go to bed and feel like I'm not going to make it. I'm hurting in my heart so bad that I'm just not going to make it. But as an adult, we have choices. You may not have a choice in the fact that you received wounds in your soul when you were really young, or even after you became adult, you may have received wounds and hurts. But as an adult, you do have a choice whether or not you let that define you. And one of the things that I came to the conclusions of this morning is I may hurt, and it seems to hit me at night more than during the day. And then I have to build myself up sometimes, and I have went through spells of having morning grief cycles. I've not been doing that as much lately, and it's like waves of grief and so on. But I do not have to let that define who I am. I may stay so depressed that I am in tears and aching and heartache and hurting all night long. I may wake up hyperventilating from excruciating sorrow, remorse, all of the things that can happen and have happened in my life. But when I get up in the morning, I have to stop and think, I have goals to reach. I have goals. One of those goals is to move back home to the land of my raising, to the east where my culture is. And that is one of my premier goals. That's never going to happen if I don't keep my act put together. There is nobody going to do this for me. I have to do this. I have other very, very important goals in my life. And I can be depressed all I want to at night. It's not that I want to, it just comes over me. But in the morning, I cannot let that define me. I have to get up and I have to shower and I have to do my housework and I have to study for a YouTube video and I have to prepare myself mentally and emotionally to sit here in front of this camera and tell you truths that I have discovered that will help me, that will help you. And I have to do that regardless of how I feel. So feelings and thoughts do not equate who you actually are. It's your actions. It's what you do. And you may reconcile with your family and it may be incredibly uncomfortable. But that action will define who you are, and that is a step up. We all do things that we regret. And I, for one, am a forgiver. I don't hold things against people. I have had horrendous acts displayed and done to me. And I really don't hold grudges. Some people do hold grudges. Some people stay angry for a very long time. And I don't, if I get a little tiff during the day at something, it may take me a couple days to get over it. I don't get over it quite as easy as I used to, but I work at it. And we do have to work at it. And try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and realize what they did. And realize that some of the things they said, some of the things I said, I absolutely don't mean it. It's just out of hurt. But remember, hurting people hurt other people. That in turn hurt other people, and they hurt other people until it becomes a vicious cycle. We have to stop hurting each other. And we need, for the sake of our communities, for the sake of our families, for the sake of the world, we need to come together again as a family, as an extended family, as a close-knit family, small, big, large. We need to rebuild traditions. And we need to let that hurt heal. Don't keep it stirred up. Pull the wood out of the fire and let your soul mend. And make excuses for the other person. People act out of fear. They act out of desperation. They do things that are unwise because they have a lapse in judgment or a lapse in mental capacity. I could go into that a lot because during the years that I was suffering with a brain that was swelling off and on, it was a type of encephalitis. I made some of the most horrendous mistakes, horrendous misjudgments, made the worst decisions of my life. I was out of control. And I just had to forgive myself. But even if you're not suffering from some huge mental illness or some huge PTSD, there are going to be times that you're going to do things that are practically unforgivable. But we need to be forgiven. And in turn, we need to forgive others. And this is what the Bible taught. This is what's good for us. Be humble in your heart and make the best of this really sad world that we live in. So instead of hurt people hurting other people, it can be hurt people healing other people. So I'm going to get off of here. I'm going to edit this video and I'm going to try to be more consistent. My life sometimes is a mess. I will admit that, but I'm making progressive steps forward, and I will talk to you again on the